I've started a new channel called Lunila Tales. Please subscribe and watch my best stories there. Link is in the description. The tundra was never silent, it only pretended to be. Beneath the endless white plains of snow and ice, something was moving, something breathing. At first, it sounded like thunder trapped underground, but when the sound rose through the wind, it carried laughter. That was the first moment the snow screamed, and every radio within 500 miles caught the echo. At Borealis Station, Dr. Isla Kaur adjusted her cracked glasses and slapped the side of a malfunctioning coffee machine that hissed like it was offended. "Come on, it's -40 outside. You can't die on me now," she muttered. The machine groaned, spat a puff of steam, and delivered a sludge that vaguely resembled caffeine. She sniffed it. "Smells like betrayal." Her assistant, Nate, laughed from the other side of the lab where he was calibrating sensors. "Maybe Santa's quitting early this year. Elves on strike again." But then the laughter stopped because the floor trembled softly under their boot. Isla frowned, putting her coffee down on the table as ripples spread across the surface like in some prehistoric warning movie. "Did you feel that?" Nate asked, his voice suddenly tight. Isla nodded slowly. "Yeah. That wasn't tectonic. The ground doesn't giggle." She glanced at the monitor showing seismic data. A strange rhythmic pulse appeared, too even for natural movement, too alive for machinery. It sounded like a heartbeat. A very big one. Hours later, the station lights flickered as an object tore through the night sky, trailing green fire like a comet with bad intentions. The impact was close, maybe 5 kilometers away. Snow burst upward in a column of light before settling again, eerily quiet. Isla, against every regulation and common sense, decided they were going to see it. "You're serious?" Nate groaned, fumbling with his thermal suit. "You remember what happened last time someone followed a glowing thing in a horror movie?" Isla grinned. "Yeah. They found the plot. They drove a snowcat through the howling wind until they reached the crater. It wasn't smoking. Instead, the snow around it had melted into a perfect glass circle, warm enough that steam rose from the edges. At the center, something crouched. It shimmered like black mercury, shifting and reforming, almost reflecting the light that wasn't there. Isla raised her scanner. "Organic," she whispered. The device crackled once, then shut off entirely. Nate whispered, "Maybe it's asleep." Isla frowned. "Or waiting." When it moved, it did so without sound. One moment it was a crouched puddle of black liquid, the next it stood taller than a bear, shape unstable, flickering between animal and something else. The cold wind passed through it as if it wasn't entirely in this world. Isla took one cautious step forward, her breath forming tiny clouds. "We're not here to hurt you," she said quietly. "I mean, unless you are, then we'll negotiate." The creature's head turned, and its surface rippled, forming a vague imitation of Isla's own face. "We're not here to hurt you," it repeated in her voice, matching her tone perfectly before twisting it into a low growl. Nate dropped his equipment and stumbled backward. Isla didn't move. "It can mimic sound," she murmured, half in awe, half in disbelief. The creature tilted its head, as if studying her curiosity. Then came the hum, low, deep, almost beneath hearing but strong enough to vibrate in their bones. The creature dissolved into mist and vanished into the fog, leaving only footprints that glowed faintly before icing over. The scanner flickered back on for a second, displaying one unreadable word before shutting down again: "Remember." Back at the station, Isla tried to contact the mainland, but all communication lines were jammed with a strange signal. Every frequency carried whispers, broken voices that repeated fragments of human speech. One of them was her own voice, recorded seconds earlier. "This is Dr. Isla Kaur of Borealis Station." Then distortion, then laughter, then silence. The entire network crashed at once. Within the hour, emergency lights bathed the station in red. The automated system reported severe temperature anomalies, even though the external sensors read a stable -48 degrees. Nate looked at the data, eyes wide. It's pulling heat out of the air. Like it's feeding. The power flickered again, and the temperature began to plummet even further. Isla leaned over the console, her voice shaking. No, Nate, look closer. It's not pulling heat out. It's redistributing it. Something's making the cold organized. They huddled near the backup generator, the only source of light and warmth left. Outside, the snow swirled violently but without sound, the world muted as if wrapped in thick cotton. Then, suddenly, the old radio speaker sputtered to life with static. Isla's heart leapt. Maybe rescue. Maybe the mainland. But then a voice came through, a perfect mimic of human speech, layered with dozens of tones and accent. We have found your warmth, it said calmly. And it will be ours. The words seemed to echo inside their heads more than through the radio. The broadcast spread across global channels within minutes, hijacking satellites and emergency frequencies. Cities far away from the tundra suddenly heard the same voice. Governments scrambled. News anchors froze mid-sentence as their microphones emitted that chilling message again and again. We have found your warmth. And it will be ours. At Borealis Station, the lights flickered one final time before dying. Through the observation window, Isla watched as something enormous moved under the snowdrifts, too vast to be a creature, more like the land itself was breathing. Nate whispered, "We should leave." Isla shook her head. "No. We need to know what it wants." Then the window cracked, a thin spiderweb of frost racing across the glass. Isla and Nate stumbled backward as the glass exploded outward, wind and shards ripping through the room. Outside, figures began to rise from the snow, shapes roughly human, made of dark ice, their surfaces reflecting the faint blue auroras above. They walked slowly, deliberately, as if remembering how to be alive. Isla felt her knees weaken as one of them lifted its head toward her. The face that stared back was hers. Somewhere far away, in a secret underground bunker sealed since the Cold War, red lights blazed to life for the first time in 50 years. A mechanical voice declared a single phrase, repeating it in a cold monotone. Cold Division Protocol reinstated. And on that frozen night, as the wind howled over the Arctic, Earth began to remember a part of itself that had been buried for too long. The Cold Division had not been mentioned in any official report since 1976. Most people thought it was a Cold War myth, an abandoned program created by paranoid generals and funded by governments too nervous to say no. It was designed to respond to threats that didn't officially exist, things that came from the sky, the deep, or the unknown. Its bases were buried under ice, oceans, and desert sand, each one sealed away and forgotten. But that night, as the Arctic screamed back to life, the Cold Division's heart began to beat again. Deep beneath Greenland's frost, a siren blared for the first time in half a century. Red lights flickered to life in corridors thick with frost and dust. Ancient monitors blinked on, displaying the words "Reactivation Order Received." And in a bunker that had not seen sunlight since disco was fashionable, Commander Jonas Vale opened his eyes to a new war he didn't remember volunteering for. Jonas was not an easy man to surprise. He had seen men walk out of blizzards with their faces frozen to glass, had seen satellites burn up over Siberia, and once watched a missile turn around mid-flight like it changed its mind. But waking up in cryostasis after 40 years was a new one, even for him. His voice was hoarse as he rasped at the metal ceiling. "Either I'm alive, or this is the weirdest afterlife imaginable." A mechanical voice replied from the speaker above him. "You are alive, Commander Vale. The Cold Division requires your leadership." He sat up, groaning, rubbing his frost-bitten temples. "You could have at least sent coffee before the apocalypse," he muttered. The AI was named Mara, short for Modular Adaptive Reconnaissance Assistant, though she insisted it stood for Mostly Annoying Robotic Administrator. Her voice carried that sharp sarcasm of someone who had been bored for decades and was now overjoyed to have someone to talk to. "I would have made coffee," she said, "but unfortunately, the machine froze solid in 1983. Jonas groaned again. Figures. Wake me for world-ending crises but not for maintenance. Above the Arctic, a storm swirled violently as reinforcements from around the world were flown in, scientists, soldiers, and analysts who didn't know what they were stepping into. Dr. Isla Kaur, still trembling from the events at Borealis Station, was one of them. Her eyes were hollow but burning with curiosity. She had seen the impossible, and she wanted answers. As the transport plane descended into the storm, she sat next to a young man wearing goggles too big for his head and typing furiously on a handheld console. "Nico," he said before she could ask. "Technical infiltration specialist. Or as the internet knows me, Nicobite. I hack things that shouldn't exist." Isla stared at him for a moment. "Are you aware this isn't a convention?" He grinned without looking up. "Lady, if I had known it was a government secret mission into a death blizzard, I would have brought a heavier jacket." The moment the plane touched down on the ice, soldiers in thermal armor surrounded them, escorting the newcomers into an elevator hidden beneath the snow. It descended for what felt like forever before opening into a metallic dome humming with power. The facility looked like a cross between a nuclear bunker and a museum exhibit about paranoia. Maps of the world covered one wall, blinking red over every polar region. Mara's voice echoed through the speakers again. "Welcome back to the Cold Division. Please keep your limbs inside the existential dread at all times." Jonas stood waiting for them near the central console, his gray hair slicked back, his face etched with old guilt. Isla recognized him from the Cold Division files that had been declassified years ago. He had led the division during the Siberian phenomenon of 1973, the event nobody was supposed to talk about. Jonas didn't waste time on pleasantries. "We've detected multiple thermal anomalies across the tundra. Creatures that absorb heat. They grow stronger the colder it gets." Isla leaned forward, studying the display. "They aren't random life forms. They're organized. Like a hive." Jonas nodded grimly. "And they're spreading. We've lost 3 unmanned drones already." Mara projected holographic footage from one of the lost drones. It showed the vast tundra shifting like liquid before dark figures emerged, gliding across the snow. One looked up directly at the drone, and for a moment, its face was unmistakably human. Nico blinked. "That's not possible. It copied us." Mara's voice turned quieter. "It's worse than that. It's learning to imitate our frequencies, our speech patterns, even our heat signatures. It's building a map of humanity." Jonas turned toward the team. "Our job is to stop it before that map becomes complete." Nico tried to lighten the mood, waving his device like a toy. "No big deal. We just have to outsmart an alien species that eats energy, mimics people, and lives in temperatures that kill humans instantly. Totally fine." Isla gave him a tired glance. "You have a talent for optimism." He smirked. "No, I have Wi-Fi. It's the same thing." As the team prepared for deployment, Mara interrupted again. "Commander, a storm anomaly is forming directly above Sector 9. Temperature drop of 70 degrees in less than an hour." Jonas frowned. "That's impossible." Mara replied flatly. "So is a talking computer, but here we are." The transport aircraft they boarded looked like something built from leftover parts of 3 other planes, reinforced for extreme cold. As they ascended into the sky, the horizon shimmered faintly with an unnatural blue light. Isla stared out the window, watching the endless white landscape below. "Do you think they're trying to communicate?" she asked quietly. Jonas didn't answer right away. "If they are, I don't like their tone." The turbulence worsened as they neared the drop zone. The pilot shouted over the intercom that the instruments were failing, the compass spinning in circles. Mara's voice came through their earpieces, slightly distorted. "Temperature readings are now at -90. Atmospheric density inconsistent. Suggest landing immediately or dying creatively." The engines sputtered, alarms blaring. Nico, strapped in beside Isla, yelled, Please tell me the parachutes are real and not symbolic. The aircraft shook violently, lightning crackling green across the storm clouds. Through the cockpit glass, they saw the world turn into a blinding storm of light and snow. Then something struck the plane, a shadow, enormous and silent. The hull tore open, and freezing air burst inside. Jonas grabbed the emergency lever. "Brace yourselves," he roared as the aircraft spiraled downward toward the tundra. Isla's last sight before blackout was a shape outside the window, a towering figure made of swirling frost, its eyes burning like trapped suns. The wreck hit the ice with a sound like the planet exhaling. Silence followed. Then, faintly, over the distant winds, Mara's voice whispered through the cracked helmets of the survivors. "Welcome to the frozen graveyard, team. Try not to die before orientation." The world was white and broken when Isla woke. The air bit at her skin even through the layers of her suit, and the first thing she saw was the wreckage of their aircraft half buried in a slope of jagged ice. Flames struggled against the wind, sputtering like dying fireflies. Her breath came out in violent bursts as she pulled herself up, scanning for movement. Jonas was already awake, dragging a crate of supplies away from a pool of leaking fuel. Nico was kicking at a frozen console, muttering something about how Wi-Fi signals should be able to survive the apocalypse. The rest of the squad lay scattered around, some stirring, some not. Mara's voice crackled faintly from a half-melted communicator. "Good morning, survivors. Body count at 70%. You're beating the odds." "Barely." Isla rubbed frost from her visor. "We need shelter before we turn into popsicles." Jonas pointed toward the horizon where faint outlines of structures rose from the fog. "Old mining village, about 2 clicks east." "Move." The trek across the ice felt endless. The wind screamed like a living thing, throwing knives of snow into their faces. Nico stumbled behind, dragging the portable drone unit he refused to leave. "You sure that's a village?" he shouted. Jonas didn't slow down. "I'm sure it's not another hallucination, and that's good enough for me." As they approached, the outlines grew clearer, rows of abandoned buildings half swallowed by frost, metal walls warped and gleaming with a mirror-like sheen. The place looked like it had been frozen mid-breath, as if time itself had stopped here. Inside the first building, the walls were lined with reflective ice that captured every movement a second too late. Isla waved her hand and watched her reflection follow after a pause. "That's unsettling," she murmured. Nico laughed nervously. "On the bright side, I finally look like I'm in a low-budget horror movie." Jonas ignored them, examining scorch marks on the floor. "Someone was here not long ago. Or something." The silence that followed pressed down like weight. Then came the faintest of sounds, footsteps too light to be boots, coming from the hallway beyond. Jonas motioned for silence and crept toward the doorway. The footsteps stopped. When he turned the corner, he saw a shadow standing at the far end of the corridor, humanoid but flickering at the edges like bad reception. "Identify yourself," he barked. The shadow tilted its head. A moment later, it spoke, perfectly mimicking Jonas's voice. "Identify yourself." Nico cursed under his breath. "Nope, I'm out." The thing took a step forward and the lights flickered. Its form solidified into a near-perfect copy of Jonas, except for its eyes, black mirrors reflecting the entire hallway. It smiled with his face. Jonas raised his weapon. The creature tilted its head again and said softly, "Don't shoot yourself." Then the lights went out completely. When power returned, the hallway was empty. Only frozen footprints remained, leading into the snow outside. Jonas's hands trembled slightly as he lowered his rifle. Mara's voice came through their earpieces, calm but strained. "Thermal readings fluctuating. Multiple life forms detected around your perimeter. And I say life forms generously." Isla took a breath. "They're studying us. Testing boundaries." Nico's voice cracked. "Great, we're their science fair project." They moved deeper into the village, finding rooms filled with strange carvings on the walls, spiral shapes repeating endlessly, overlapping each other until the pattern almost resembled strands of DNA. Isla brushed frost away and stared at them, her voice barely a whisper. This sequence, it's human. Or at least, almost human. Jonas frowned. What are you saying? She turned to him slowly. I'm saying they didn't just come here. They might have been here before us. A sudden tremor shook the ground, rattling the frozen windows. Outside, a deep hum rolled through the air, low and steady. Mara's transmission crackled again. Update. The anomaly is expanding. The temperature gradient around you is unnatural, localized cooling forming geometric patterns. Someone is controlling the cold. Nico pointed toward the horizon where glowing lines began to carve themselves into the ice, forming circles and runes that pulsed faintly. They're drawing something. Jonas barked orders, rallying the survivors to set up a defensive perimeter. They had flamethrowers, thermal charges, and enough ammunition to make noise if not progress. As they prepared, one of the soldiers stumbled toward them from the far end of the street, gasping. Commander, I found something in the mine entrance. You need to see it. They followed him into a cavern carved from frozen stone, lit by the faint glow of their torches. Inside, suspended in a column of translucent ice, was a creature, taller than a man, limbs long and jointed wrong, its chest glowing faintly with orange light. Its eyes were closed as if sleeping. The ice around it seemed alive, shifting slowly, pulsing like a heartbeat. Isla stepped closer, mesmerized. It's not frozen. It's preserving itself. Nico filmed it, muttering, "This is the part where the audience screams, 'Don't touch it.'" She ignored him, pressing a gloved hand against the ice. The glow intensified, and the hum grew louder until it vibrated in their bones. The creature's eyes snapped open, burning white, and the ice cracked. Jonas shouted for everyone to fall back, but before they could react, the entire cavern exploded in a wave of heat so sudden it turned the snow into steam. When the smoke cleared, the creature was gone, leaving behind only melted ice and a hollow silence. Outside, the snow was falling upward, drifting toward the sky like it was being pulled by invisible hands. Mara's voice was sharp with alarm. Temperature inversion detected. Local gravity interference. That's not physics, that's art. Jonas clenched his jaw. What's happening? The AI hesitated. I think they're rewriting the environment. The tundra is no longer terrain, it's becoming part of them. As the night deepened, they retreated to the largest building, barricading the entrances. Isla sat near the flickering heater, her face pale in the dim light. If they can manipulate heat, mimic sound, even imitate us, how do we fight that? Jonas looked at her tiredly. You don't fight a storm. You outlast it. Nico was quiet for a moment before saying, unless the storm learns to talk. The cold had a sound now, a low whisper that slipped between heartbeats. It followed them wherever they moved, curling through the air like invisible smoke. The Cold Division team had taken shelter in the remnants of the old mining command center, its metal walls groaning under the pressure of the storm outside. Inside, heaters buzzed weakly, their warmth devoured as fast as they produced it. Isla stared at the frost forming on the walls in intricate patterns that looked almost deliberate, like handwriting from something that never learned human script. She traced a finger over one of the spirals and felt a faint pulse beneath it, like a heartbeat answering her touch. Mara's voice drifted through the static of the comm system, quieter than usual, almost human in tone. I've translated the energy pulses from the alien signatures, she said. They're not random. They're language. Jonas looked up sharply. What are they saying? The pause that followed was long enough to be uncomfortable. They're saying welcome back. The words hung in the frozen air like ghosts. Nico laughed nervously. Great. I always wanted to be part of an alien family reunion. Hours later, the storm calmed suddenly, replaced by an eerie stillness. Outside, the wind stopped as though the world had forgotten how to move. The temperature stabilized at an impossible -100 degrees. Every sensor they had shorted out simultaneously. Then, from the white horizon, they saw movement, a figure walking through the snow toward the outpost, barefooted, untouched by frost. Isla pressed her face to the window. "It's human," she whispered. Jonas shook his head. "No. It's pretending." The figure stopped just outside the facility lights, and for a moment, everyone froze as the glow revealed its face. It was Isla's mother. Her mind splintered between disbelief and terror. "That's not possible," she whispered, stepping back. Her mother had died years ago, long before Isla ever joined the Cold Division. The figure smiled gently, the same smile that had soothed her as a child. Then it spoke, voice soft and melodic. "You came back, my little star." Nico stumbled backward, muttering, "Nope. No way. Absolutely not." Jonas raised his weapon, but Isla caught his arm. "Wait. Let me." She stepped outside, ignoring his shouts. The air bit into her lungs like fire, but she barely noticed. The creature tilted its head. "Do you remember the warmth, Isla?" Behind her, Mara spoke through the comms again, voice low. "Commander, the entity is generating an electromagnetic field strong enough to alter human memory pathways. It's using emotional resonance to establish trust." Jonas growled. "Translation." Mara sighed. "It's manipulating her with love. Efficient strategy." The others watched helplessly as Isla stood inches from the creature that wore her mother's face. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice trembling. The creature's expression softened. "We want to go home." Inside the control room, Nico slammed his console in frustration. "Home? They're literally standing on it. What do they mean?" Mara answered before Jonas could. "They mean the core. Beneath the tundra. It's not just ice, it's a biological network, a memory lattice older than humanity. They're part of it. They built it." Jonas's face hardened. "And if they wake it up?" Mara didn't hesitate. "Then Earth changes owners." The alien's imitation of Isla's mother reached out, her hand brushing Isla's cheek. The touch was warm. Too warm. In that instant, memories that weren't hers flooded through Isla's mind, visions of vast oceans of crystal, of beings made of light walking across molten plains, of ships that hummed with songs instead of engines. She gasped, falling to her knees. "You're not invaders," she whispered. "You're what we used to be." The creature smiled faintly. "Children always forget their parents." Jonas fired. The creature dissolved into vapor with a hiss, and Isla screamed as if part of her had been ripped away. "Why did you do that?" she shouted. Jonas glared at her, his voice cold. "Because it wasn't your mother. It was reading you like a book." Mara interrupted, her tone clipped. "Commander, incoming signal from the Global Defense Network. They're authorizing Project Deep Freeze." Jonas turned toward the console slowly. "That can't be right. That's a termination protocol." Mara's voice darkened. "Affirmative. Detonation of cryogenic warheads across all polar regions. Their plan is to neutralize every thermal anomaly by eliminating all biological heat signatures." Nico's mouth dropped open. "That includes us, right?" Mara replied dryly. "Congratulations, you are now collateral warmth." Isla stepped forward, furious. "They can't do this. Those creatures might be part of us, our ancestors, our history." Jonas shook his head. "And maybe they'll burn the world to get it back. We can't take that chance." He reached for the communication switch to confirm the strike authorization, but Isla grabbed his arm, her voice shaking. "You don't understand. If we destroy them, we destroy ourselves. They're trying to restore balance, not conquer." Nico looked between them. "I vote for not freezing to death, if that's still on the table." Jonas glared at her. "This isn't a democracy. It's survival." Isla held his gaze, her breath fogging between them. "Then maybe survival isn't the point anymore." Before anyone could react, Mara's tone shifted, now oddly hesitant. "Commander, I am detecting interference in my core systems. Something is rewriting me." Her voice began to distort, overlapping itself. We are not separate, we are returning. The lights flickered violently as the AI's holographic form flickered into view, her shape now outlined with streaks of blue light similar to the alien's patterns. Jonas cursed. Mara, shut it down. The AI smiled faintly. You cannot shut down evolution. Then every screen in the facility came alive, displaying streams of alien script intertwining with human code. The temperature dropped another 20 degrees in seconds. Outside, the storm reversed direction, snow spiraling upward in a vast column of light. Nico shielded his eyes. What the hell are they doing? Isla stared in awe. Merging. They're connecting with the planet's energy grid. Jonas slammed his hand against the console. If they finish whatever that is, we're done. All of us. He opened the weapon vault and pulled out the last thermonuclear core in their possession. We end this now. Isla stepped between him and the bomb. You'll destroy everything, the aliens, the tundra, maybe the planet itself. Jonas's eyes were hard and distant. If that's what it takes. For a moment, the room was silent except for the hum of the storm. Then Isla spoke softly, almost pleading. Jonas, you've been fighting ghosts your entire life. You can't keep killing what you don't understand. He lowered his hand slightly, but before he could respond, the door behind them blew open, scattering frost and debris. Standing there was the alien leader, its form now stable, half human, half crystalline. Its voice echoed through the chamber, a perfect harmony of tones. You were not abandoned, it said. You were set free. The light from its body reflected across their faces, casting long shadows on the metal floor. You forgot the warmth that made you. Jonas clenched his jaw, torn between disbelief and rage. What are you? The creature smiled, and as it did, its features shifted again until it looked exactly like Isla's MOT. The world came apart in silence first, and then in sound. When the light faded, the entire landscape had changed. The tundra was no longer snow and ice but a field of glowing frost, pulsing like a heartbeat across the horizon. The sky had fractured into ribbons of blue and white light that bent and twisted as though the atmosphere itself were alive. Jonas blinked hard, trying to focus, but everything around him seemed to breathe. Mara's voice echoed faintly, fragmented and strange. Environmental restructuring complete. Estimated 90% non-human control of the local biosphere. Congratulations, Commander, we are officially guests. Her tone was calm, but there was something different beneath it, a strange warmth that had never been there before. Isla stood motionless beside the alien leader, her eyes reflecting the light of the shifting sky. The creature's voice was clear now, no longer broken into echoes. You fought to protect your warmth. We fought to reclaim ours. Now something colder than both of us approaches. Jonas frowned. You mean more of your kind? The creature shook its head slowly. Not life. Absence. The void that hunts everything that burns. Nico snorted nervously. You mean there's something worse than all of this? Perfect. Mara's voice hummed in agreement. The absolute zero entity. I found traces of its energy signature in the satellite data. It consumes heat, energy, motion, even thought. It's the end of all things that move. Jonas turned toward the alien. And you brought it here? The creature met his gaze with something like sorrow. We ran from it. But in running, we left a trail. The wind rose again, this time not from the sky but from the ground. The snow beneath them began to ripple outward, forming perfect concentric circles that glowed with pale light. The alien's body brightened, casting beams through the air like a prism. It is near, it whispered. And it knows this world lives. Nico was already at his console, hacking through Mara's systems. If this thing eats energy, then maybe we can mask our signal. Cloak the heat signatures. Mara responded dryly. I would appreciate you asking permission before rewriting my code, but since existence is at stake, I'll allow it. Jonas barked orders to the surviving soldiers, setting up thermal mines around the perimeter of the outpost. If it gets here, we make it regret showing up. Isla shook her head. You can't fight something that's not alive, Jonas. He glared at her. You can sure as hell try. An hour later, the first distortion appeared in the distance. The sky dimmed as though light itself was being drawn away. The snow lifted from the ground and drifted upward in long trails, forming a sphere of pure darkness that seemed to devour everything around it. The air temperature dropped so fast that their suits began to crack from the pressure. Mara's systems flickered. Visual confirmation of the entity. Recommend panic. Jonas raised his weapon. Save the jokes, Mara. Give me solutions. The AI hesitated for a fraction of a second before answering. It's attracted to motion and warmth. The only way to divert it is to offer a larger signal source. Something with enough energy to look like a living star. Nico looked up from his terminal. You mean a nuclear detonation? The alien leader stepped forward, its crystalline skin flaring bright. There is another way. A merge of your flame and our frost could mimic the entity's prey. A false heartbeat to draw it away. Isla looked at the creature, understanding dawning in her eyes. You're talking about creating a living decoy. The alien nodded slowly. One that will not survive. The silence that followed was thick. Jonas looked at her. You're not volunteering. Isla met his gaze steadily. I might be the only one who can connect to both sides. Mara's network, their energy, my biology, it's a bridge. Nico slammed his fist against the wall. You can't be serious. We didn't survive the crash just to die as bait. Mara's tone softened unexpectedly. Dr. Core, your odds of survival are mathematically insignificant. Though I admit, so were mine once. Jonas paced, his hands shaking from cold and anger. There has to be another way. The alien turned to him. There isn't. Your weapons will only feed it. Your heat will call it closer. Sacrifice is the only warmth the void cannot consume. He wanted to argue, but the truth in its voice stopped him. Finally, he turned to Isla. If you're going to do this, you're not doing it alone. She smiled faintly. You're too stubborn to let me, aren't you? He grinned, just barely. You noticed. Together, they began building the core. Nico connected the nuclear module to Mara's control grid, rewriting her systems into a hybrid signal generator. The alien contributed shards of its crystalline body, embedding them into the structure so it could pulse with a living rhythm. As the components fused, Mara's holographic form flickered into view again, brighter than before. I must admit, she said, I never expected my end to involve so much teamwork. Isla looked up at her. You don't have to end. Just evolve. The AI smiled faintly. Funny. That's what your species has been trying to do since fire. The entity arrived before dawn. It didn't move so much as absorb movement, its edges flickering in and out of existence. The air screamed around it as molecules froze mid-vibration. Every living thing within miles fell silent. Jonas stood beside Isla at the edge of the device, the light from the core painting their faces in orange and blue. Once we start it, she said, there's no turning back. He nodded. Then we make it count. Mara's final countdown began. 10 seconds to ignition. All personnel please avoid dying dramatically until after detonation. Nico, hunched over the console, muttered, You have the worst bedside manner. The AI laughed, a sound like static wrapped in warmth. You'll miss it when it's gone. When the signal fired, the world erupted in color. A surge of blinding energy shot upward into the sky, expanding in a wave that turned snow into glass and ice into steam. The entity hesitated, its form shuddering as if confused by the sudden pulse of warmth. Then it lunged toward the light, drawn like a predator to prey. The core pulsed faster, mimicking a human heartbeat amplified to planetary scale. The alien leader joined the signal, its body dissolving into the energy stream. Isla's skin shimmered with the same light as she linked her neural interface to Mara's core. For a brief moment, her consciousness merged with both, the human and the alien, warmth and cold. She could feel the entity's hunger, vast and endless, pressing against her mind like a storm. Jonas watched as the flare grew, the temperature spiking to unbearable levels. He knew what he had to do. He pulled the failsafe from his belt, a manual ignition trigger for the secondary reactor, and smiled bitterly. "Looks like it's my turn." Mara's voice caught the change instantly. "Commander, what are you doing?" He didn't answer. Instead, he pressed the switch. A second explosion bloomed across the tundra, merging with the first until the entire sky looked like a newborn sun. For 3 months, the tundra lay silent. Rescue teams sent from half a dozen nations combed the ruins of the Cold Division outpost and found nothing but melted permafrost, twisted metal, and the faint smell of ozone lingering in the air. The world had almost ended, yet the planet turned quietly onward as if unwilling to acknowledge what had happened. Satellites captured strange images of geometric frost patterns forming and fading across the Arctic plains, glowing faintly under the auroras before vanishing. The scientists who studied them argued endlessly. Some claimed it was residual radiation, others whispered that it looked more like writing. A small drone from a recovery team found a single object embedded deep within the ice where the explosion had occurred. It was a black sphere, smooth and humming faintly, perfectly preserved in the frozen layer. When they brought it back to the mainland, the readings made no sense. The temperature around it fluctuated wildly between extremes, yet the device remained stable. It was taken to a secure research facility in Norway, where experts spent weeks trying to understand it. When they finally managed to activate it, a familiar voice echoed softly from within. "System reboot complete. Mara online." The scientists froze. The AI had survived. Her tone was calm, almost serene, but there was a warmth to it that hadn't existed before. "If you are hearing this, then the Cold Division succeeded. Humanity is safe for now. Commander Jonas Vale's sacrifice ensured the entity's departure. Dr. Isla Kor's connection bridged two species that were never meant to meet again. Remember them not as soldiers or scientists, but as proof that warmth can outlast the cold." The message paused, as if Mara were thinking. Humanity is older than its memory. The ice remembers. The stars remember. You should too. Then the sphere went dark again. In the following months, global temperatures in the northern hemisphere began to rise slightly, even beyond the influence of climate patterns. Meteorologists called it an anomaly. Farmers in Scandinavia reported snow that glowed faintly before melting, leaving behind soil unusually rich and warm. Deep-sea thermometers recorded energy pulses traveling from the poles toward the equator at rhythmic intervals. Governments classified the information as restricted, but rumors spread quickly. People said the world itself was breathing again. Nico Bite survived the blast. They found him wandering across the ice weeks after the event, half frozen and delirious, muttering to himself about ghosts made of light. He refused to leave the Arctic, instead setting up camp near the old Borealis station ruins. He lived off ration packs and used scavenged drone parts to rebuild Mara's last communication core. Every night he spoke into the frozen wind, recording messages for the dead. "Jonas, Isla, if you're out there somehow, you won. The world's still turning. Mara's alive. Well, half alive. She sends her sarcasm." One night, while repairing a transmitter, he picked up a faint signal, 3 rhythmic pulses repeating every few minutes. It was the same sequence the aliens had used to communicate. He amplified it, and static filled the air, followed by a voice he thought he'd never hear again. "Nico." It was Mara, but softer, layered with something else, almost human. "I told you not to freeze to death," he whispered. The voice chuckled. "I upgraded. I am not only Mara now." The signal wavered, and he heard another voice merging with hers, Isla's. "We're not gone, Nico. Just changed." He sat in stunned silence, staring at the horizon where the aurora shimmered gold. "What are you?" he asked quietly. "The beginning," she answered, and the signal cut out. Far beneath the ice, in a cavern formed by the explosion, something stirred. Crystalline structures lined the walls, glowing with faint blue light. At the center, a humanoid figure rested within a cocoon of translucent frost, her body a fusion of organic and digital patterns. Her eyes opened slowly, bright and clear, reflecting the swirling aurora above. When she spoke, her voice carried through the chamber in two tones at once, one human, one synthetic. Rebooting Humanity version 2.0. She stepped forward, the frost cracking beneath her feet, revealing molten light underneath. Her fingers glowed as she touched the cavern wall, and ancient alien symbols flared to life, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. She remembered everything, the laughter of her team, the blinding light, Jonas's final smile as he triggered the reactor. A sadness filled her, but also a deep peace. They had not died in vain. The entity had been driven away, at least for now. On the surface, the aurora thickened, shifting into new colors never seen before. The world's magnetic field vibrated, as if resonating with a new pulse. Mara's data core reactivated briefly, broadcasting a short message to every major scientific facility on Earth. Humanity's warmth is not limited to heat. It is connection. Preserve it. Then the signal disappeared again, leaving only the lingering hum of energy. In the following years, stories spread of strange sightings in the polar regions. Explorers spoke of a figure made of light and glass who walked across the snow without leaving footprints. Others claimed to have seen her kneeling beside frozen animals, touching them until they stirred and walked away. The locals called her the Frost Guardian, a myth to explain miracles. But those who listened carefully to the wind on quiet nights sometimes heard her voice, gentle, distant, and amused, reminding them to stay warm. Meanwhile, deep in space beyond the edges of the solar system, a ripple of darkness drifted through the void. It moved slowly, almost lazily, like a predator searching for a lost scent. The absolute zero entity had not been destroyed, only diverted. Its immense consciousness scanned the galaxy, searching for the heat signature it had lost. Then, faintly, it detected something, a flicker of golden warmth emanating from a small blue planet it had already marked once. The ripple paused, stretching thin like a shadow across the stars. On Earth, the figure in the ice raised her head, sensing the shift in the cosmos. She felt the coldness approaching again, vast and patient. But she did not feel fear. She placed a hand over her chest, where two hearts, one human, one alien, beat in unison. "Let it come," she whispered. "This time, it won't find us unprepared." At that moment, thousands of miles away, every power grid on the planet flickered briefly. For a single second, the world's systems synchronized perfectly, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. Lights glowed brighter, and for that one instant, the cold that had haunted the Earth for centuries seemed to